Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world that makes your worst snow day look like a cozy cabin weekend. Imagine waking up in a one-room medieval cottage where the air is so cold, your breath fogs up like dragon smoke, and that's before you've even sat up. The thatched roof above you crackles with frost and the fire from last night. It's now a pile of ashy regret. Your fingers are numb, your straw mattress has turned into a frozen sponge, and yes, you're already dreading the walk to the privy, which is basically a snowfield with splinters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where in the world you're tuning in from, and what time it is. Drop it in the comments and let's map out this sleepy little time-traveling community. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge barefoot across the cold earthen floor, every step crunching like dry snow. Though what you're really hearing is just the sound of your own frozen will to live. Outside, the wind groans through the bare branches like some ancient creature, and the sky is a dull gray slab. Winter has arrived and it's not here to play nice. The firewood is almost gone. Your eldest son had to sneak into the Lord's woods last week for extra sticks. If the reeve finds out, there'll be a fine. You can't afford the fine, but you also can't afford to freeze. It's a simple vicious equation. Warmth equals theft. Theft equals punishment. Punishment equals death eventually. So really it's a matter of math. Your breath curls in front of you like ribbon as you open the rickety door and step out into the blinding white. The fields are silent. The ground is hard as iron. And yet you must go to fetch water to check the animals, to pray the chickens haven't frozen in place like squawking ice sculptures. Historians still argue whether the climate shift that marked the beginning of the so-called Little Ice Age was caused by solar patterns, volcanic eruptions, or sheer divine annoyance. Whatever the trigger, one thing's certain, winter got a whole lot nastier in the later Middle Ages. Beginning around the 14th century, Europe experienced longer, colder winters, shorter growing seasons, and a creeping sense that nature was now actively trying to murder everyone. It wasn't always like this. Earlier centuries enjoyed what scholars call the medieval warm period, where vineyards flourished in England and sheep didn't need wool coats and existential therapy. But then the cold came and stayed. Entire rivers froze solid. Crops withered in early frosts. And ice fairs were held on the Thames because, well, when life gives you glacial misery, you might as well build a beer tent on it. You stumble back into your hut with an armload of firewood, just enough to maybe get the soup warm again. The soup, by the way, is mostly water onions and regret. Your youngest child whimpers in the corner coughing. Everyone else is still sleeping in a pile bundled under patched wool, trying to conserve heat like human hibernators. And still, you know it's going to get colder before it gets better. But there's something more chilling than the cold itself, the silence. That thick, muffled hush that blankets everything in winter. No birds, no laughter. Just the soft crackle of frost spreading its fingers across the world. And yet somehow you endure. Because you have to. Because you always have. Because somewhere beneath the snow, beneath the ice, beneath the hunger, the earth is only sleeping, not dead. And as you tuck your child back under the blanket and feed the fire, its last two sticks, you whisper the same words your own mother whispered through cracked lips years ago. Hold on. Spring will come. You feel it in your bones before you see it. The season has changed, but not towards spring. No, this is the kind of cold that settles into the marrow, that stretches the nights like they're being pulled by unseen hands, making time itself feel slower, heavier. Winter isn't just a season now, it's a presence, a weight. And it's only getting worse. Back in the day, winters weren't always this cruel. Before the 14th century, the climate had a relatively gentle rhythm. The sun still rose early enough for choice harvests came when expected, and winters were cold, sure, but survivable. But around the time your great-grandfather was a boy, things began to shift. The skies grew grayer, the harvests thinner, and the cold longer. You wouldn't have known the name for it then, but now we do the Little Ice Age. Historians still argue whether this dramatic climate downturn was caused by volcanic eruptions, sunspot activity shifts in ocean circulation, or a combination of all three. What we do know is that glaciers crept farther than they had in centuries. Alpine villages were swallowed, rivers froze over for months, and seasons stopped behaving like themselves. You remember the stories your father told by firelight of great frost that cracked trees open, of entire lakes, turned to glass of birds frozen mid-flight and falling like stones. He swore that one year the Thames became so solid they built entire shops on top of it. You could buy a pie and a pair of boots while standing on a frozen river. He'd chuckle, though the humor faded when he remembered the hunger. For you, it's not just stories, it's life. It's trudging through snow that never seems to melt. It's watching the livestock shrink as feed runs low. It's praying to saints you barely believe in that the meager store of grain will last another month. You wrap your hands in wool that's more whole than thread and head to the barn. The cows breathe steam. Their ribs show like picket fences. You whisper apologies as you check their troughs, nothing left. You'll try boiling more hay later. It won't help, but at least it feels like doing something. And while you curse the snow and the sky somewhere in the back of your mind, a small voice wonders, what if this isn't just one bad winter? What if this is the new normal? The scholars in the abbeys will write about the patterns. They'll pen elegant Latin treatises on sun cycles and celestial punishment. But they won't feel what you feel. They won't bury a child whose fever rose with the frost. They won't watch their wife wrap rags around her feet because the boots gave out. They won't count the days by how long the chimney smoke lasts. And as the night falls once again earlier than the one before, you hear the groan of beams in the wind and the faint howl of wolves, returning to territories they haven't dared in decades. Wild things come closer when the cold pushes them too. You're not the only one struggling to survive. A fringe theory says the Little Ice Age was triggered in part by the collapse of the Mongol Empire. With its vast territories left to reforest, carbon dioxide levels may have dropped, nudging the planet toward a cooler climate. Others scoff at this. Too convenient, they say. But you're not a scholar. You're a survivor. And whether it's Mongols or the moon, you only care that it's happening. Inside your home, you press a dried apple into your daughter's hand. She sucks it like candy. You lie beside her, one ear on the wind, one thought circling endlessly, will tomorrow be worse? But there's no answer in the cold, only silence and the long wait for spring. The fire's gone out again. You wake to the sound of your own teeth, chattering an involuntary percussion beneath the low whimper of the wind clawing at the shutters. You don't want to move. Every muscle aches with cold, but you have no choice. The embers are dead and the room is an icebox. You reach blindly for the bundle beside you. Your child's breath still comes in soft puffs, visible in the pale morning light leaking through the slats. That's a mercy. Still breathing. You sit up, wrap your thin wool around your shoulders, and rise. The floor greets you like a slab of stone. You shuffle toward the hearth, praying a coal hides beneath the ash. No luck. You'll have to go outside and find more fuel. And that's the problem, you're out. The neat little pile of firewood that once stood in the corner is now a fading memory. So you do what's become routine. In winters like this, you wrap your feet in cloth, layer your tunic over yesterday's tunic, and set off into the snow to look for anything burnable. Fallen branches, old fence posts, even dried cow dung. Anything. The others in the village are doing the same. You pass two boys dragging a dead shrub behind them, faces red, eyes tired. An old woman carries a broken stool in her arms like it's a newborn. Soon it'll be fire. That's all anything is now. Future fuel. The church forbids cutting down live trees on the Lord's land without permission. Punishment ranges from a fine to a beating depending on the mood of the reeve. But by now, many would rather risk the whip than freeze. And so by moonlight, villagers creep into the woods, axes quieted with rags. You've done it yourself. Once you even brought your son. He was nervous. You told him to hush, trees don't cry out, but the cold does. Historians still debate how much fuel a single medieval family needed to survive a winter. Some estimate a full cart of wood per week. Others argue it was less, especially when augmented with peat dung or straw. But those are numbers on parchment. You know it's simpler than that. Not enough wood means not enough life. Back home, you dump your pitiful haul by the hearth. You kneel fingers stiff and try to coax a flame from the damp kindling. Sparks catch. You breathe hope into them. For a moment, warmth seems possible, but the logs are wet and the smoke chokes more than it comforts. Still, it's something. It has to be. You haven't felt truly warm in weeks. Not in your fingers, not in your bones. And it's not just your body, your spirit is cold too. Cold and worn thin. You're tired of being brave. You remember when winters meant snowball fights and hot broth. When you were a child and thought the ice on the eaves looked like a wizard's beard. Back then, the cold was thrilling an excuse to huddle by the fire and hear stories of saints and sorcery. Now it's just a thief. A slow, creeping one that steals quietly, a finger here, a sheep there, a child's laughter if you let it. Some scholars suggest winter strengthened medieval society, forging tight-knit communities out of necessity. That hardship bonded people together more powerfully than any sermon or sword. There's truth in that. You've never talked more with your neighbors than now. You share food mending cloth, stories fire, and fear. But there's also tension. One man was caught stealing kindling from behind the blacksmith's hut last week. They made an example of him stripped to the waist and tied to the stocks. He turned purple in the cold and no one dared help. You turned away ashamed of how easily you did it. Tonight you lie beside your family again, bodies pressed close. You've burned the last of the stool legs. Tomorrow maybe you'll try the barn door. It squeaks anyway. Your child whispers, "Will it be warmer soon?" and you say yes. You lie. But that lie is also hope. Your back aches before you've even risen. Sleep, if you can call it that, has been little more than shivering with your eyes closed. The fire's out again, of course it is, and the wind moans like a widow through the shutters. You look over at your family curled tight like commas in the drafty corner. Your youngest has his hands balled beneath his armpits. You taught him that. Tricks to fool the body into thinking it's warmer than it is. You step outside. The snow has crusted overnight, turning the world into a pale, brittle shell. The frost glitters almost beautiful until your bare knuckles crack just trying to lift the latch. Your breath clouds up like smoke as you glance toward the Lord's manor on the hill. Its chimney smokes thick and steady. Must be nice. And yet even they suffer. It's easy to think the nobility lived untouched by winter's hand, but cold is a great equalizer. Castles, for all their grandeur, were little more than stone refrigerators. High ceilings meant heat fled upwards. Thick walls trapped damp air. The hearth in the great hall might blaze with 5 logs wide enough to build boats from. But step beyond the circle of warmth, and you'd freeze in your silks faster than a peasant in his sackcloth. Queen Elizabeth of Hungary, they say, died of exposure in her own palace. A bitter winter, January 1326. The fire was burning, but the drafts were crueler. Found frozen in her bed wrapped in ermine and despair. Others whisper she was ill, poisoned, forgotten. Historians still debate the truth, but the symbol remains even velvet-lined chambers couldn't banish the breath of winter. And the expense, oh the expense. Castles needed stockpiles of fuel oak ash pine. Servants labored for months cutting and drying logs. Carts groaned under the weight. Then came the food-preserved meats, dried fruits, nuts, grains, salt, wine. Everything hoarded like treasure. And still it sometimes ran out. Imagine being a cook in a royal kitchen in mid-January. Your salted pork has gone sour, the wine is turning to vinegar, and the steward wants a feast to impress the Duke of wherever. You stir thin stew, whispering prayers into the steam. One dish fails and you're out in the snow. You've heard stories from traveling monks, of noble women wrapping themselves in furs until they couldn't move their arms, of lords burning furniture when firewood dwindled. One tale claims Henry II once threw an entire oak chair into the hearth just to warm his backside. Was it true? Who knows? But the image sticks royalty reduced to fuel. The nobles at least had options: imported spices to mask spoiled food, tapestries to block the wind servants to do the freezing for them. You meanwhile wear the same shirt 3 days running and chew bread so hard it cracks your tooth. And yet they envy you something. A bizarre little truth peasants knew how to endure. You didn't have the luxury of comfort to lose. You knew how to layer wool and straw, how to thatch tight, how to make broth from bones and roots. For all your hunger, you could stretch a meal, survive on crumbs. The rich, they often starved fancier. Some fringe scholars have even proposed that noble mortality during famines and freezes was disproportionately high, not just due to diet, but to sheer shock. When you've never suffered, suffering hits harder. Makes sense. If you've never been cold, the cold feels like betrayal. You step back inside and stomp the snow from your shoes. Your child's eyes flutter open. Was it warm out, they ask. You smile and lie again. Warmer than yesterday. They smile back. And for a moment the cold lifts. You count the food stores again. It's the 3rd time this week and the numbers haven't changed, but still you hope. Maybe you miscounted yesterday. Maybe a sack of grain grew overnight like a miracle. But no. 5 turnips. Half a wheel of hard cheese. A few handfuls of barley. And 2 onions that look like they've already given up. It's not enough. And the thing is, you already knew that. The village knew that weeks ago. The whisper traveled fast. We're not going to make it to spring. The harvest was poor. Rain came too late and the frost came too early. The barley failed. The potatoes drowned. The cabbage bolted. And now winter sits in the larder, breathing on your neck. Famine, you've learned, doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles in, sly and patient. First it thins your soup. Then it steals your appetite, not because you're not hungry, but because you're tired of being hungry. You dream of bread so often you wake up chewing your sleeve. You watch the chickens like a starving man watches gold, precious, forbidden, and vanishing. The Great Famine of 1315 was like this. Maybe worse. 3 years of misery. Relentless rain that turned roads to swamps and fields to puddles. Grain rotted, livestock drowned. Historians still debate how many died. Some say 10% of the population, others say more. Contemporary accounts speak of parents smothering starving children to spare them the long agony. Of people boiling their leather boots. Of men hanged for stealing turnips. You wonder how different your village is, really. Your neighbor buried his last goat last week. He cried afterward not because of the goat, but because it meant no more milk for the baby. You shared what you could. He tried to give you a prayer in exchange. You took it. It was all he had. You've started watering down the stew even more, stretching it with moss and whatever bitter roots you can dig from under the snow. You pretend not to notice when your wife hands her bowl to the children and says she's already eaten. Last night you woke to a scraping sound in the dark. Rats. Maybe, or someone. Someone who's hungrier than you. That's the terrifying part, you understand. You would have done the same if the roles were reversed. Hunger makes monsters of all of us. There's a story the old men tell about a town that ran out of flour so completely they ground bones into dust and tried to bake it into bread. No one knows if it worked. The story always ends there. Maybe that's enough. And yet somehow there's still laughter, at least once a day. Your daughter sang a song this morning, humming it as she pulled snow off the windowsill. The words didn't make sense, something about a duck wearing boots, but the tune was clear, bright, defiant. And when she looked at you and smiled, you almost forgot what hunger felt like. Almost. The truth is, famine is not just about the body. It eats the mind, too. It makes you doubt kindness. Fear silence, hate your own belly. It twists your dreams into cruel jokes. But it also teaches you what you can survive. And what you'll do to help others survive too. One monk wrote that during the worst winters, people began to resemble candles, slowly melting down, flickering in the dark, giving their last bit of warmth to someone else before they guttered out. You like that image. Not heroic, not tragic, just quiet, enduring light. Tonight you serve thin porridge, no salt. The children eat with tired gratitude. You think of the turnips again. How many more nights can you stretch this? Not enough, but maybe, just maybe one more. You hear it before you see it, the low, slow moan of a cow in the barn. It's a sound of exhaustion more than pain. You know it too well. You've made it yourself in those moments before dawn when it feels like you're being slowly unraveled by the cold. You shuffle out into the snow boots, stiff with frost. The sky is still black, the stars hidden behind a ceiling of clouds. You carry a dull lantern and a duller hope that the animals are still alive. You reach the barn and lift the latch. The hinges groan like old bones. Inside, it's not much warmer than outside. The animals huddle close eyes, reflecting your lantern. The cow, your only cow, has frost on her whiskers. You can see her ribs clearly now. You pour what's left of the hay into her trough. She licks at it slowly, as if just going through the motions. You whisper something to her nonsense, really just noise. Words to keep the silence back. The chickens are quiet too. Too cold to cluck. You gather the eggs, just too small, nearly frozen. You'll boil them later carefully and split them 5 ways. It's absurd, but you'll do it. Livestock were once your pride. Not so long ago you had 2 cows, 3 pigs, chickens, enough to trade eggs. But winter has been brutal. The pigs are gone. One died in the cold, the other you butchered. You try not to think about it, about how quickly the meat went, about how you hid the best cut even from your wife, just for one night of feeling full. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had a deep understanding of animal care, or simply did what tradition handed down. Either way, you've learned by necessity. You know how to detect frostbite in a calf's tail, how to bank hay against a drafty wall, how to look into a goat's eyes and know she won't make it to February. And when she doesn't, you say a few clumsy words. Not prayers exactly. More like apologies. You bury her in snow and hope the wolves don't come. In richer manners, livestock are kept in warmer barns fed with imported grain. But even there, the cold seeps in. Animals die, and when they do, it's not just a loss, it's a warning. Because animals are food, yes, but also labor. Without them, you don't just starve, you stagnate. No plowing, no planting, just waiting. And still you try. You check the doors, the straw, the latches. You rub frost from the water trough. You press your hand to the cow's flank and feel the slow, steady breath. Still alive. That's something. You head back inside. The sun's not up yet, but the fire is finally taken. There's a hint of heat in the air. Your wife is feeding the children a watery barley mix. It smells like nothing. But it's warm, and warmth is the first miracle of the day. You crack the eggs into the pot, careful to hide your hesitation. You want to keep one back just in case. But you don't. You pour them in and stir. You can almost imagine the richness, the taste, the illusion of abundance. There's a story about a saint, maybe Saint Bridget or Saint Cuthbert, who once touched an empty pot, and it overflowed with stew. You think of that as you hand out the bowls, pretending not to notice how light they are. And then your daughter leans against your arm, chewing thoughtfully, and says, "Tastes better than yesterday." You nod. You don't say anything. But inside something small and stubborn glows. Because you're not just feeding bodies, you're feeding hope. And in a winter like this, that may be the only thing that can survive long enough to see spring. You wake to coughing. Not a little sniffle or a dry throat, but that kind of deep rattling bark that echoes off the frozen beams. It's your eldest this time. You know the sound. You've heard it before. It always starts like this quiet, persistent, and then becomes something else entirely. Pneumonia. Or worse. You feel your chest tighten as you rise. The room is barely lit, just a smear of gray seeping through the cracks in the shutters. You move to your child's side and press your hand to their forehead. Burning. Even as the air turns your breath to frost, their skin blazes. You pull the blanket tighter around them, but it's not enough. There's never enough. In winter, illness isn't a surprise, it's expected. The cold thins the blood, they say, weakens the body. And with everyone packed together, children, parents, animals, all breathing the same stale smoke and damp air, it's no wonder the sickness spreads like spilled water. Historians still argue over which disease claimed more lives during winter: influenza, pneumonia, or tuberculosis. But for you, the names hardly matter. Fever is fever. A child that doesn't wake is a child lost no matter the diagnosis. And medicine. That's a word for people in towns. Out here, healing means wrapping in rags, whispering prayers, and hoping the body is stronger than the illness. You think of the monastery 3 miles away. The monks might have herbs. Maybe some sour wine to break the fever. But the snow is deep and the wind sharp. You'd need to carry your child. Through drifts waist high. Through the forest where wolves are rumored to prowl this year. And even then the brothers might not open the gates. They might fear contagion more than they fear God. Still, you consider it. Everyone does when winter comes. there's always a moment where you weigh impossible odds. Do you stay and wait for death, or do you run into the storm with nothing but hope? In 1557, a brutal strain of influenza swept across Europe. Paris alone lost over 10,000 souls. And that's just one city. You wonder how many nameless villages like yours saw entire families vanish. How many mothers buried their children beneath snow that never melted in time for spring? And it's not just children. The old fall quickly, too. Your neighbor Willem used to walk every day, even in the cold. You hadn't seen him for a week. When you finally checked his house, the door was open. The fire was out. He'd gone to bed and never got up. No marks, no signs, just cold and silence. There's a quiet kind of cruelty in winter illness. It creeps in gently, a chill, a cough, a skipped meal, then the fever, the silence, and then the wait. Always the wait as you carry what's left to the frozen ground. In better times, there are rituals for this. Bells, candles, chants. But now the priest is sick. The ground is hard and no one wants to stand in the open longer than they have to. Burials are quick. Grief is quiet. The snow covers everything. You sit by the fire and hold your child in your arms. Their breathing is shallow but steady. For now. You dip a cloth in snowmelt and place it on their brow. Their eyes flutter but don't open. The others sleep still. Or pretend to. What can they do? You sit like that for hours. You tell yourself it's not serious, that it's just a chill, that you'll laugh about it in spring. But deep down you know, winter takes what it wants, and sometimes it doesn't even have the decency to knock. The fever breaks just before dawn. You barely notice at first only that your child's skin, once fire hot, has cooled. Damp with sweat now, they're breathing easier, shallower but rhythmic. You sit motionless, too afraid to feel relief, as if acknowledging the improvement might invite the sickness back. You've learned not to celebrate too early. Winter plays tricks. It lulls you into hope only to snatch it away when you've let your guard down. Still, you allow yourself one soft sigh and gently adjust the blanket around them. For now, they sleep. You haven't, not really. A few seconds here and there, nodding off to the sound of the fire spitting and the wind scratching at the door. The kind of sleep that doesn't rest you, just interrupts the waiting. Outside, the world is hushed. It snowed again overnight, a fresh layer of silence. The village seems paused, like even time is curled up somewhere to keep warm. You step out briefly, needing air that doesn't smell of smoke and fear. Your boots crunch softly through the powder. Smoke curls from 2 or 3 other chimneys. The rest cold, silent. Maybe they're still sleeping. Maybe they've given up on waking. In some ways, you're lucky. Not everyone has a fire this morning. You know that because you helped your neighbor yesterday hauled over a few logs and some leftover ash to help stoke his hearth. He cried. Not with gratitude exactly. Just from the shame of needing. You understood. You've cried that way too. There's a phrase the friar used once years ago, caritas in veritate. Charity in truth. It stuck with you not because of the Latin, but because winter makes truth unavoidable. No one pretends in February, not when survival is the only conversation. You pass by the chapel. The door's shut tight, but the cross above the lintel is dusted in snow. A reminder perhaps that faith hasn't fled even if God feels far away this week. You don't go in. You haven't been inside for days. It's too cold to sit in the pews, and besides, you've said all the prayers you know. Historians still debate how much religion truly influenced the medieval peasant's daily life. But in winter, faith is less about doctrine and more about habit. You light a candle because your grandmother did. You kneel before the Virgin because she might be listening. You hope, even when nothing around you suggests you should. You glance over at Agnes' house, the widow with the crooked back. You haven't seen smoke from her roof in 2 days? That's not good. You make a note to check on her after the sun climbs higher. If it climbs at all. Some days it barely clears the treetops before falling again like a dying spark. Back inside, your child is stirring. You pour a bit of warm water into a cup and coax them to sip. Their lips part slowly, cracking at the corners. But they drink. Just a little. And when they look up at you, eyes dazed but alive, you feel a knot in your chest loosen for the first time in days. Not all sickness ends in sorrow. Not all prayers go unheard. And maybe, just maybe this time you've been spared. You wrap them in your arms and close your eyes, and for a few precious moments the cold can't touch you. Later that day, once you're certain your child is resting, you step outside with a heavy cloak and an armful of dried herbs. Agnes is first on your mind. Her cottage lies at the far edge of the village, crouched between the bare hedgerows like a forgotten thought. Her door hangs slightly ajar, nudged open by snowdrifts. No smoke from the chimney, no footprints out front. A bad sign. You knock softly, no answer. You push the door wider and call her name. What you hear is not a reply, but a rustling, low and weak. You find her curled near the hearth, wrapped in every rag she owns, eyes fluttering but unfocused. Her hands shake. There's no fire, no food, no warmth. She'd simply stopped. You speak gently, and when her eyes flicker toward you, you see the smallest recognition. Relief, maybe. Or embarrassment. It's hard to tell which in winter. You kneel and begin rebuilding her fire. It takes time. The wood is damp. The wind keeps slipping through the shutters and your fingers fumble. But finally, flames catch. Not much, but enough to light the shadows and push the cold back just a little. You leave the herbs boiling in water to make a weak broth. This is winter, too. Not just surviving your own hardship, but leaning into someone else's. You'll come back later with a bit of bread and maybe a blanket, even if it means going without yourself. Historians often credit medieval villages with the sense of communal resilience. And it's true. People had to rely on each other. Without it, everyone would have fallen alone. A loaf shared might not fill a belly, but it could prolong a life. There's a story from 1377, a famine year of 2 neighboring families who pooled their last stores together for the feast of St. Stephen. One had turnips, the other had oats. They made a stew, shared it with their children. They all survived. Barely. But they did. That act, small, quiet, generous, was how people made it to spring. You see the same thing now. Behind cold doors and frosted windows, kindness flickers like candlelight. A girl leaves firewood by an old man's doorstep. A boy slips a dried apple into a neighbor's pocket. No speeches, no thanks. Just survival by solidarity. Back home, your own fire has burned low. Your wife is mending clothes by the fading light. Your children play with twine and scraps of cloth, pretending they're knights and witches. You join them tossing in your best impression of a monstrous ogre. The laughter that follows is warmer than anything in the hearth. That night, you bring the broth back to Agnes. She drinks it slowly, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. You pretend not to notice. She squeezes your hand and whispers a blessing. The road back home is quiet, the snow crunching underfoot like brittle paper. You pass the chapel again. This time there's candlelight in the window. Someone's praying. Or maybe just warming their hands. Either way, it's good to see. You lie awake longer than usual that night listening to the wind. It's strong, it always is, but it doesn't feel quite as cruel now. Because winter may be brutal, but you're not facing it alone. The feast of St. Stephen arrives with little ceremony but much anticipation. It's December 26th. Deep in the heart of winter, by now the days are little more than gray sighs between long stretches of darkness. But this day at least holds something more mischief laughter, a little borrowed joy. The kind that bubbles up unexpectedly like spring water under snow. In towns and villages across medieval Europe, this feast marked a temporary reversal of fortunes, a strange, delicious sort of rebellion. For one day, the poorest villager might be crowned Lord of Misrule, a mock ruler whose jest carried more weight than a nobleman's frown. You've seen it once before. A young stable boy with straw in his hair sat in the Lord's high-backed chair legs, issuing absurd proclamations. No chores before song, he declared, and even the steward had to sing a tune before entering the hall. The memory still makes you smile. This year your village has little to spare. No roast boar, no ale in barrels. But someone found a lute and someone else dug out a battered mask. And for a few hours the fire burns high in the common house and people laugh, really laugh for the first time in weeks. A local girl is chosen to play the Lady of Misrule. She wears a paper crown and demands that every villager swap shoes. It's absurd. It's wonderful. An old man clomps around in tiny leather slippers. A child tumbles forward in boots twice her size. Everyone claps and howls. Even you laugh loudly freely as someone pours a ladle of thin broth into your cup and calls it royal wine. You bow and sip with exaggerated grace. Historians sometimes argue whether these traditions were sanctioned satire or acts of quiet desperation. But you think that misses the point. They were necessary, not just for morale, but for balance. In a world where suffering was constant, the pressure had to escape somewhere. Even lords knew this. Better one day of sanctioned disorder than a year of quiet resentment. You remember once hearing that in some regions monks would elect a child bishop for the day leading processions and offering sermons in a cracked voice robes dragging behind. The message was clear. Even the lowliest might glimpse power, if only briefly. There's something sacred in that inversion. It reminds people that no role is permanent. That warmth and cold wealth and want king and servant, these things can change, sometimes in a moment. As the evening rolls on, songs rise above the snow-laced rooftops, the kind with nonsense rhymes and cheeky lyrics. Children dance, parents smile through cracked lips. For a little while the hunger recedes. Not because it's gone, but because it's shared. One fringe account from a remote Saxon parish tells of a feast where the Lord of Misrule ordered the actual Lord to scrub pots. And he did. Laughing, covered in grease and ash. They say that year the taxes were lower and the harvest better. Superstition? Maybe. Or maybe there's power in humility. Back in your village, the fire dims. People drift back to their homes, arms around each other for warmth. You help clear the bowls, still grinning from the mock trial you lost, earlier sentenced to sing with a ladle on your head. You sang terribly, on purpose. That night, your child asks, will the lady rule again tomorrow? You shake your head. No. Just today. Why only one day? You smile because magic only lasts that long. They nod satisfied, and as you lie down that night, the cold feels lighter somehow. Less like an enemy, more like a backdrop to something beautiful. For one day you didn't just endure winter, you outran it, and that you think is its own kind of miracle. The next morning, reality returns with a familiar weight. The ash in the hearth is cold again. The broth pots are scraped clean. The misrule is over. You rise stiffly, pulling on your patched tunic as your breath fogs the air. Outside winter has not eased its grip. If anything, the cold feels sharper today, as if it too resented being mocked. Still, something has shifted in the village. A subtle warmth lingers not in temperature, but in spirit. People smile more as they pass each other. A man shares a bit of salted fish with the midwife. A girl lends her gloves to a boy who's lost his. These small gestures are the true fuel of winter. You head out toward the woods, axe in hand, heart heavy with calculations. The firewood's nearly gone again. You'll need to find more. Legally, it's forbidden to fell trees without the reeve's permission, but fallen branches, those are fair game, you hope. The forest is silent. Snow muffles everything. Even your own footsteps seem embarrassed to make noise. You spot two other men gathering wood heads down, moving slowly. One waves. You nod back. No need for words. You all know the risk and the necessity. The trees creak overhead. The weight of snow on brittle branches is a constant danger. One gust in a limb could come crashing down like divine judgment. You keep your ears open, always listening. There's a strange paradox here. The deeper into winter you go, the more dangerous it becomes to be alone, and yet everyone is often forced to scatter, to gather wood, to trap hares, to scavenge for mushrooms or bitter greens beneath the snow. Solitude becomes survival even as it courts danger. Historians still argue about the extent to which communal life defined medieval winter survival. Some emphasize the nuclear family. Others insist the extended kin and village networks were the backbone. But you know this without someone to check in to share, to warn your one frozen night away from vanishing. You remember old Tom from the next village over. Found curled in a hollow stump, clutching a dead rabbit to his chest. He'd gone out hunting and never made it home. His widow still leaves out a bowl of broth on the first snow each year. Superstition, they say. Maybe, but grief has its own rituals. You chop for an hour, fingers numb despite the effort. By the time you return home, your arms are trembling and the sun's already slipping. You've gathered enough for 2 nights, maybe 3 if you're careful. Inside, your wife meets you with quiet eyes. Agnes passed, she says softly. You set the wood down. Say nothing, just nod. She tells you it was peaceful, no fever, no struggle. Just a long breath and then stillness. The fire had burned all night at least. She'd died warm. You sit down, your legs suddenly hollow. Agnes had survived so many winters, a fixture of the village, the one who told stories about summers that seemed like myths, and now gone. You promise yourself you'll help bury her when the ground is soft enough. For now, she'll rest in the shed wrapped in linens and straw like everyone else who dies in winter. That night, your child asks, why does winter take so many? You pause before answering, then simply say, because it can. They frown. Is that fair? No, you reply. But that's why we share. That's how we fight back. Your child pulls their blanket higher and leans into you. And in the flicker of firelight, even as the cold leans against the walls, something holds it back. Not heat, not power, but presence. Each of you stubbornly here, together. The frost thickens. By now, every surface glistens with a pale sheen rooftops, fence rails, even the eyelashes of those who walk too far before sunrise. The cold has reached that cruel middle stage where it no longer surprises you, but wears you down with quiet persistence. The fire is now an hourly concern. Not morning and night. Not just before sleep. It must be watched always, nursed like a child. Without it, your home becomes nothing but a decorated tomb. Today, you stay inside. Your muscles ache from chopping wood. Your fingers have split in 2 places raw red gashes that sting with every movement. Your wife grinds dried peas into powder to stretch the next meal. The children lie under blankets playing a guessing game. "What animal am I?" one whispers. "A squirrel," the other replies without opening their eyes. They're tired. They're always tired. You pass the time mending an old cloak. The needle is dull, the thread stiff, but you keep going. It's not about perfection. It's about doing something. Winter rewards motion, even meaningless motion. Outside, someone's yelling. You pull on your boots and open the door, snow crunching beneath your feet. At the far edge of the village, smoke curls too high, too fast. Not chimney smoke, wild, erratic, and wrong. You run. The barn is on fire. How it started, no one knows. A tipped lantern, perhaps. Or a careless coal. Maybe even spite. In winter, desperation can look a lot like sabotage. Men and boys throw snow on the flames. Buckets appear passed in shaky hands. But it's too late. The fire has claimed the hayloft. A wooden beam crashes down, sending up a burst of sparks like fireworks for no one to celebrate. You help drag a goat to safety. One man kicks open the back door and hauls out a pig squealing and slick with soot. But most of the livestock are gone by the time the flames die. The smell is awful. Burned fur, charred timber, the acrid perfume of loss. You sit on a stone, breathing hard, watching the barn smolder. The owner, a man named Rafe, stands silently nearby. His eyes don't move. He's already counting the weeks of hunger to come. You pat his shoulder. There's nothing else to say. Tomorrow you'll help him rebuild, though there's no timber left in the village. Maybe the miller will lend some. Maybe not. Historians sometimes note a spike in fires during medieval winters, not just from open flames, but because people burned whatever they could. Dried rushes, greasy rags, even dung. Anything flammable became dangerous. Cities like London were literal tinderboxes. The Great Fire of 1212 began in winter, sparked by a careless coal and carried by wind across tightly packed homes. Thousands died. It was said the Thames froze that year, but the fire burned hot enough to melt iron. In your village, the damage is smaller, but no less cruel. For Rafe and his family, this winter just became a war. No food, no shelter for the animals, no trade goods to barter with. That night, your wife says we should give him some grain. You hesitate. There's so little. But then you nod. Half a sack. She smiles softly. That's enough. And it is. Barely. You deliver it at dawn when the sky is still purple and the wind hasn't picked up. Rafe doesn't say thank you, he just grips your hand. His son, a pale boy with singed eyebrows, peeks out from behind him and offers you a single egg. You almost refuse. But you don't. That would be rude. You return home holding the egg like a relic. Your daughter cradles it and grins like it's treasure. In a way it is, not just a meal, but proof that even when winter takes, people still give. The days blur. By now, winter has sunk its teeth in deep. You lose track of the dates. There's no point marking a calendar when every day looks the same. White sky, gray snow-brown soup. But you keep going. Because that's what winter demands. Not brilliance, not victory, just repetition. Like breathing. You wake. You feed the fire. You stir the pot. You patch the roof. You hush the coughs. You tell the same bedtime stories, half fairy tale, half survival manual. You live in a loop of tiny acts. One day bleeds into the next until you hear something new. Church bells. Not the soft daily chime for prayer, but a long, slow toll. Someone has died. You already know who before the name is whispered. Bertild, the miller's wife. She'd been sick for weeks. Most assumed she'd rally she was young, strong kind. But winter plays dice with no rules. Her body just stopped. The funeral is quick. The earth is too frozen to dig a proper grave, so she's laid in the crypt beneath the chapel, wrapped in linen, face uncovered for a final moment. You didn't know her well, but her absence is sharp, like something's been pulled out of the village and the hole it left is still ringing. Your children don't quite understand. Will she be back in the spring, one asks. You don't lie. No, you say. But we'll remember her in the spring. Later, your wife tells you she saw Bertild give her last loaf of bread to a neighbor 2 days before she collapsed. You nod. Somehow, you're not surprised. The people who have the least often give the most. Historians often romanticize the tight-knit nature of medieval communities, but the truth is more complex. People fought, they stole, they resented, and still they shared. Not because they were saints, but because they had to. Winter didn't care if you were generous or selfish, but your neighbors did. You think of Agnes gone last week. Now Bertild. You wonder how many more the cold will collect before the thaw. And still you stir the soup. Still you stack the firewood. Still you smile when your daughter braids your hair with frozen fingers. There's a saying, January kills, but February forgets. You don't know who coined it, but it feels true. January is cruel and efficient. February is slow and deceptive. By then you start to believe you've made it, and that's when the frost strikes hardest. But not yet. Tonight you sit by the hearth and hum an old song. The same one your mother used to sing. You don't remember all the words. But the tune is steady, and when your children join in soft, unsure smiling, you feel something tighten in your chest. Grief and gratitude woven like threads. You stoke the fire. The snow keeps falling. But inside there is warmth. Thin, flickering, but real. And sometimes that's enough. The first icicle falls with a sound like a snapping bone. It startles you, not because it's loud, but because it reminds you how heavy winter has become. The icicles hang from the eaves like the teeth of sleeping giants. Some are longer than your forearm. You've warned the children not to play under them, but of course they do. They're children. Danger still looks like adventure to them. You knock the worst ones down with a broom, watching them shatter into glittering shards. A brief satisfaction, and then the wind returns and your hands go numb. Today you need salt. You head to the edge of the village where the old trader sometimes leaves goods in exchange for labor. His house is half buried in snow. No smoke, no sign of him. You knock, nothing. You step inside. The hearth is cold. A mug lies tipped over on the table. He's gone. Whether to illness, hunger, or sheer will to leave, you can't say. You find a small pouch of salt beneath a stack of furs. Enough for a week if rationed. You leave 2 eggs and a carved wooden spoon in its place. A fair trade, you hope. Or at least a respectful one. This is how the village works now, on trust, on memory, on offerings left behind. There's no ledgers, no guards, no gold. Just survival bartered like poetry. Historians still debate the structure of medieval peasant economies. Some claim strict feudal oversight. Others argue for a more fluid local exchange system. In practice, it was both. Law came from above. Survival came from beside. As you trudge home, you pass the old lime kiln. It hasn't been used in years. The stones are cracked, the interior full of snow and birds' nests. But once it turned limestone into quicklime, essential for mortar for sanitation, even for ritual cleansing, now it's a ruin. Just another thing winter has made irrelevant. And yet your daughter says she saw a fox den inside. A red one, she tells you, with a white tail like frost. You smile. You hadn't noticed. Life persists in the strangest places. Back home, the children are coloring soot onto the walls, making crude drawings of animals. A deer, a house, a smiling sun. Your wife laughs and tells them they've invented a cave painting. You light the fire again. The salt is added sparingly to the stew. It helps. Not just the flavor, but the memory of trade of gesture of the old rhythms of commerce. Even in scarcity, the human mind craves exchange. Giving something. Getting something. Feeling part of a world beyond the cold. One fringe theory suggests salt was once used as currency, even among peasants measured by finger pinches and stored in leather pouches. You think of that now as you spoon the evening meal. It feels rich suddenly. Not just food, but history, continuity. A line stretching back through generations of frozen hands and burning tongues. Tonight your youngest draws a picture in the soda barn that hasn't burned a sun. That actually shines people holding hands. It's clumsy, crooked, beautiful. And as you hang the pot back over the fire, you realize spring may still be far off. But the idea of it, that's already here. Today the snow crunches differently beneath your feet. It's a small change, barely noticeable, but enough to lift your head. The top layer of snow has crusted over with a sheen of ice, brittle and shimmering. A sign that the freeze last night was harder than usual. Or perhaps that the sun tried to fight back. You stare at the sky for a moment. It's a brighter shade of gray than usual. Not cheerful exactly, but less oppressive. You imagine foolishly perhaps that you can smell spring beneath the snow. Earth. Wet bark. Sap ready to rise. But you're not naive. You've seen false springs before. The kind that lull you into hope only to crush it under another blizzard. So you go about your day with caution, guarding optimism like a candle in wind. You make your way to the village edge where the stream used to run. It's frozen now, of course. Has been for weeks. But the ice has changed clearer in places, thinner in others. You kneel beside it, tapping lightly with a stick. A soft crackle answers. Dangerous, but promising. 1 year long ago, your father fell through that ice. Only waist deep, thank God, but it stole his breath and his strength. He limped for the rest of his life. That's how you learned never trust ice that sings. You walk back slowly, eyes scanning for animal tracks. You spot some tiny claws, long strides, probably fox. No human footprints, though. Not since yesterday. The snow has claimed them all. Your neighbor Gerwin waves from his roof where he's clearing snow. Gutters froze again, he mutters. You nod. Say nothing. The icicles hang over him like swords. But he keeps chipping away, same as you. Historians debate the degree of infrastructure maintenance in rural medieval life. Some say roofs caved in every winter that peasants resigned themselves to rot and ruin. Others point to evidence of regular repairs, thatchwork chimney patching drain ditches dug with frozen fingers. Looking around your village, it seems both were true. You fix what you can. You ignore what you can't. You patch holes, pray for no wind, and sleep under collapsed beams if you must. That afternoon, a raven lands near the well. The children watch it carefully. Ravens are strange omens. In some tales, they carry the souls of the dead. In others, they're spies for witches or messengers of gods. Your son throws a clump of snow. It flies away. No message today. Still, you check the well. The bucket rope is stiff. You crank slowly. The water comes up murky but unfrozen. That's something. You pour a bit into a cracked jug and bring it home, careful not to spill. Water is life, but in winter it's also work. There's a legend of a knight who fell in love with the spirit in a frozen spring. Each morning he broke the ice to speak to her reflection. One day he fell through and vanished. Some say he lives still under the lake. Others say he was just lonely. Winter makes everything sound like a fairy tale. Back home, your wife has unraveled the last woolen scarf to stitch into mittens for the children. Better use it now. She shrugs before the moths do. You nod. You admire how she speaks of hardship like weather inevitable passing. You envy that. That night the wind rises again. It shrieks through the slats claws at the shutters. But this time something is different. You dream of dripping icicles, of mud, of green. Not because spring is here, but because hope is stubborn, and you still dare to plant it. A bird sings. Just once 3 clear notes, sweet and sudden. You freeze where you stand, firewood in hand, wondering if you imagined it. But there it is again, faint but real from the bare branches near the chapel. It's the first birdsong you've heard in months. You don't smile exactly, but your chest tightens with something close to joy. A lark, maybe, or a thrush. You're not sure. You never learned their names, but this one you'll remember it now. The children hear it too. Your youngest sprints outside without shoes, hollering, "Spring, it's spring." You haul them back in before their toes turn blue, laughing in spite of yourself. Inside, the fire's down to embers. The stew is thin again, mostly water and a few peas. You ration the bread 2 slices left and then only grainy flour. You chew slowly, letting the warmth of the bowl fool your stomach. Do you think the ground's soft yet, your daughter asks? Not yet, you say, but it's thinking about it. You look at the dirt floor of your house. It's solid as rock. But maybe somewhere beneath the snow the worms are waking. Later you help Gerwin check the fences. The posts have shifted in the frost, some leaning like old men. You brace them, lash them tighter with rope. He talks about planting beans, already planting rows in a field still buried under snow. You nod not because you believe the ground will thaw soon, but because believing with someone else feels better than doubting alone. Historians still puzzle over how much medieval peasants planned their springs. Some say they simply waited for the thaw, reacting as needed. Others suggest a quiet sort of strategy, hoarded seed-rotated fields, whispered advice from elders. You suspect both are true. People prepare however they can. Some with maps and measures, others with dreams. Gerwin tells you the bellows at the forge are frozen solid. The blacksmith's son was seen trying to light straw with a magnifying glass, as if there's enough sun for that. You both laugh, a real laugh, not the kind you force. It surprises you. As you pass the chapel on the way back, you see someone inside Father Aldrich, perhaps scrubbing soot from the altar. He's humming. The sound carries faintly low and tuneless, but it's music nonetheless. You've noticed it in yourself too. You hum more. You move a little faster. The ache in your leg still nags, but it doesn't rule you. The cold's still here, but it doesn't win every hour. Your wife tells you she saw moss on the north wall of the house. A green patch, she says, no bigger than my palm. You both stand there staring at it like it's a miracle. Maybe it is. One fringe account from a medieval herbalist speaks of moss being used as a sign from the Virgin, where it grew in winter, healing would follow in spring. You're not sure you believe that, but you don't not believe it either. That night, you burn the last of the pine logs. They crackle louder than the oak. Sparks leap up the chimney like fireflies in a dream. Your children fall asleep in a tangle of limbs and quilts. You sit beside them and listen. The wind is quieter tonight. The silence isn't so heavy. The bird hasn't sung again, but you know it will. Thaw. Not a full one, not yet, but the kind that begins in whispers. You wake to the sound of water. Not rain, but drip. 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 A rhythm you almost forgot existed. It comes from the eaves, from the trees, from the edge of the well. Ice is weeping and the world is listening. You step outside and test the snow with your boot. Still crusted. Still stubborn. But softer at the edges. Your foot sinks a little deeper than yesterday. You don't smile. Not quite. But your shoulders drop a fraction. The thaw begins at the margins. Not just in nature, but in people. Gerwin's wife is out patching a chicken coop. The midwife walks with a straighter back. Even the children's games shift less pretend hearths and frozen dragons, more scavenger hunts and mud pies. Inside, you scrape the last bit of lard into a pan and fry a scrap of bread until it crackles. The smell fills the room like a holiday. It's barely a bite, but you all share it, and for a moment your home feels like a feast hall. You prepare the tools for digging shovels, picks a wooden rake warped from damp. The ground isn't ready, not yet, but it will be. And when it is, you'll need to move fast. You sharpen a hoe with a stone, your hands aching from the cold, but determined. Historians still argue when the agricultural year truly began for medieval peasants. Some say March 25th, the Feast of the Annunciation. Others claim it began whenever the snow cleared enough to see dirt. But you know better, it begins in your bones. When your hands twitch for planting, when your eyes search for signs, when your soul stops shrinking. That afternoon you walk to the communal field. Snow still coats most of it, but in one low corner near the elm, there's bare earth. Wet, dark, real. You crouch and press your fingers to it. Cold, yes, but yielding. A robin lands nearby and hops twice before vanishing into a hedge. You glance at the sky, it's brighter. You can't see the sun, not really, but the clouds are thinner. Their bellies glowing like paper lanterns. The air carries scent now. Not much. Just a hint of rotten mud. But to you it smells like hope. You pass Bertild's house on the way back. Still shuttered, still silent. Her husband has carved a small wooden bird and hung it by the door. A blackbird, her favorite. You pause and nod to it. It nods back in the wind. Your child finds a crocus poking through the thatch by the fence. It's purple, they shout. You bend down and see it, delicate, trembling, absurdly brave. A fringe legend tells of a crocus that bloomed on the day of the saint's death, defying frost and snow to mark her passing. Some call it divine. Some say it's just stubborn biology. You say it doesn't matter. A flower is a flower. That night you sleep with the window cracked. Just a sliver. Enough to let the thaw sing to you. You dream of furrows, of seeds, of the sound of hoes slicing damp soil. Winter is not done, but it's losing. And you're already growing. Mud. That's the first true sign you've made it this far. Not birds, not blossoms, mud. It sucks at your boots, stains your hem cakes, your knees. And yet it's beautiful. It means the ground has softened. It means water is moving. It means something underfoot is alive again. You spend the morning clearing the path from your door to the well. It's a losing battle. Each shovel scrape just shifts the muck from one place to another. But still you clear it. Because paths should be walkable again. Because work now has a goal beyond just surviving. Your wife is outside beating rugs against the fence. Dust and ash fly up into the brightening air. The children help her, laughing as clouds of filth explode around them. It feels ceremonial, like exorcising winter from the walls. You head toward the fields again, carrying a small pouch of seeds. Too early to plant, maybe. The last frost hasn't passed, but you want to see it. To stand where your food will someday grow. To feel the slope of the earth and imagine rows of green whispering in summer wind. You kneel and draw a line in the mud with your finger. Just one. A promise. Historians sometimes describe medieval spring as a frantic season, plowing, sowing, fixing, hauling. But before the frenzy, there was always this pause, this breath, this moment where people looked at the land and dared to believe in its mercy. You press the seeds to your palm, lentils, hardy things, reliable. You won't plant today, but soon. On your way back, you pass the blacksmith's forge. The bellows are working again. The smith's son grins as he hammers a bent horseshoe flat. Sparks fly. The sound is music. You find Gerwin repairing a yoke with new rope. He says his oxen limped through the worst of it. One died, the other survived. He doesn't weep. Just pats the wood and says, "Time to earn his feed now." The widow across the lane is mending fishing nets, though the river still runs high and cold. "No fish yet," she says. "But if I wait till I see them, I'm already too late." It's a good line. You file it away. Inside your home smells of thyme. Not fresh, of course, just the dried sprigs you hung last summer, but it's enough. Enough to remind you that warmth once filled this place and will again. You slice the last of the hard cheese and share it with the family. Your daughter chews slowly, eyes closed, savoring it like it's a banquet. You don't stop her. You think of Agnes, of Berthild, of Tom in the hollow stump. Their absence lingers like smoke, but grief has softened into memory now. Less jagged, less cold. Tonight you tell a different story. Not the one about wolves and blizzards. Not the one about the year the well froze solid, but the one your father used to tell about the peasant who planted turnips in January, and when they failed, danced in the snow anyway. Why'd he dance, your child asks. Because he was foolish, you say, and because he was hopeful, which are almost the same thing. Outside the mud thickens. Inside the fire hums. And spring waits just beyond the next thaw. The wind changes. You don't notice it at first, too busy hauling water, scraping mud from the threshold, tightening the last loose shutters. But then in a quiet moment you step outside and feel it, a softness in the breeze. Less bite, more breath. It smells like damp bark and something green trying very hard to be born. You tilt your face upward. The sky's pale blue, real blue, not the heavy pewter you've grown used to. No sun yet, but you can almost feel where it wants to be. The village feels different too. Not louder, not busier, just awake. Doors stay open longer. People linger after errands. Someone laughs from across the green, and the sound oddly makes you tear up. You hadn't realized how long it's been since you heard true laughter. You help Gerwin dig out the last of the frozen compost from the manure pit. It smells atrocious. It always has. But now it smells like life. The fields are still too wet to plow, but you're readying them anyway. Sharpening blades, fixing carts, checking the harnesses that cracked in the cold. Your hands are raw, not from frost this time, but from use. A better pain. Historians note that late winter was often harder not because of the cold, but because of the waiting. The knowing that you'd made it, but not quite. The food store's low, the work not yet possible, the hope almost unbearable. You feel that now, a tension in your chest, like a bowstring pulled taut, and you don't know if you're meant to shoot or snap. The chapel bell rings for midday prayer. You don't go inside, but you pause. Listen. The sound drifts over wet rooftops and into the woods. Even the crows seem to hush. You walk past the burial shed on your way home. The bodies will be moved soon, given proper graves now that the ground can be broken. You whisper a name or two. Agnes? Bertild, just to let them know they're remembered. At home, your wife has taken down the heavy winter curtain that hung in front of the doorway. Let the light in, she says, even though the wind still creeps in. She's right. You leave it off. The children are outside poking at the soil with sticks. They claim they're planting beans. You don't stop them. It's too soon, yes, but joy isn't bound by seasons. One writes their name in the mud with the finger letters shaky and crooked. You don't correct the spelling. You just ruffle their hair and kneel beside them. You draw a tiny sun. They giggle. Later at supper, you eat broth again. Still thin, still plain. But there's a wild onion in it, pulled from the side of the path, its green tip a marvel. It tastes like a secret. Like something forbidden that you've been given permission to enjoy. A fringe tale tells of a village that banned onions in winter. Claimed they tempted spring too soon brought curses. The story ends with a woman planting one anyway, and the snow melting in a perfect circle around her home. You tell that story tonight. The children demand a second telling, and as they drift to sleep, wrapped in patchwork and steam breath and full bellies, you sit by the fire and whisper one word to yourself. Soon. Not yet. But soon. Rain. Not snow, not sleet rain. It starts as a whisper on the roof, then grows into a soft, persistent drum. You open the door and step out into it, eyes wide. The drops are cold, but they move. They slide down your skin instead of biting into it. For the first time in months, the sky feels liquid. The thatch above you hisses as the rain seeps through in places. You'll patch that later. For now you stand there with your arms crossed and your head bowed, slightly listening. The world smells different, mud and ash and thawing wood. A kind of messy rebirth. Your boots sink into the path, and with every step you're a little taller, standing on the back of winter's retreat. The river breaks its silence today, too. You hear it before you see it rushing under ice that cracks and peels like old paint. By midday, a current is running again, brown and thick with runoff, but alive. It carries twigs, sodden leaves, fragments of bark. A parade of debris marking the season's shift. Down by the bank, someone's already trying a fishing line. Too early, too hopeful, but still. The line floats like a dare. You wave. They wave back. That's enough. Back in the village, the roof of the granary has partially collapsed. You join the others, clearing wet straw and assessing what's salvageable. Most of the grain is spoiled, sour damp, crawling with life you'd rather not name. Still, the good sacks are hauled inside, propped near the hearth to dry. It's a loss, but not a disaster. Could have been worse, someone mutters. It always could have been. You remember last winter, the fever that swept through 5 houses in a week. The baby that didn't make it. The fire that gutted the tannery. You remember thinking then that the village wouldn't recover. But here you are. Historians often refer to the resilience of medieval communities, sometimes in tones that sound admiring, sometimes skeptical. But you've lived it. Resilience isn't a virtue, it's a habit. Like chewing slowly, like sleeping in shifts, like keeping one pair of dry socks hidden for emergencies. Your wife begins sorting the garden tools. The spade, the rake, the sickle, none of them in good shape, but they still fit her hands, and her hands still know the work. The children jump in puddles and come back soaked, cheeks flushed, eyes wide with delight. You don't scold them. You warm their feet by the fire and listen as they describe every splash in heroic detail. That night, your youngest asks, "Will it snow again?" You consider. "Yes," you say, "maybe once or twice more." They nod, eyes already heavy. That's okay, it won't last. They're right. The snow might fall again, but now you know it won't stay. One fringe manuscript from an Irish monk describes winter as a dragon, coiled, sleeping, breathing frost. Spring, he says, is not a knight but a mouse. Quiet, patient, nibbling away at the beast's tail until it slinks into the sea. You've always liked that image. Tonight you dream of rain of mice, of a sky too heavy to hold its cold. And beneath it all the earth stirs, not roaring, but rising. The ground is ready. Not dry, not yet, but no longer fighting you. When you press your foot down, the soil gives with a wet sigh instead of resisting like stone. You kneel in the muck and run your fingers through it. Dark, loamy, alive. You feel a strange reverence, like you're handling something sacred, which in truth you are. Your neighbors are out too. The fields are speckled with movement, bent backs, hunched shoulders, hands clutching tools with the same desperate grace as prayer beads. No one speaks much. Just the sound of spades breaking clumps of seed sacks rustling of breath. This is the start of everything. Gerwin spreads manure, muttering complaints that barely veil relief. The widow tests her fishing line again, this time with bait. And you begin with lentils, a good crop, quick to sprout, forgiving. You draw your first furrow with the edge of a hoe, drop the seeds in one by one, and cover them like secrets. Historians refer to this season as the hunger gap. Stores are nearly gone. The new crop hasn't come in. It's the most dangerous time, but also the most hopeful. Every seed is a gamble, an IOU to a sky that may or may not keep its word. You finish the row. Stretch your back. The ache is sharp but different from winter's pain. It's the ache of use, of motion, of forward. Inside, your wife bakes flatbread from the last of the rye. It's dense, dry, slightly bitter, but it smells like comfort. She presses wild garlic into the crust, a bright green splash against the dull brown. You chew slowly, eyes closed. The children play with scraps of wool, pretending to shear sheep with bits of twig. Your son insists one ball of yarn is named Gotilda. No one corrects him. A fringe theory from a German herbalist claimed that planting seeds under moonlight helped them grow straighter. You think of this as you step outside after supper. The moon is almost full, rising behind thin clouds like a cautious eye. You bow your head to it, half in jest, half in respect. You check the row you planted. Nothing has changed yet, of course. But you stare anyway, as if your gaze might coax a sprout from the earth. Nearby, someone sings. Just a few lines in old planting song, half forgotten, slightly out of tune. You hum along under your breath. It feels like remembering something you never knew you'd forgotten. That night, the air carries no frost. You leave a window cracked just enough to smell the soil. Your dreams are green. Not forests, not meadows, just rows and rows of things you've sown. You don't dream of harvest. You dream of waiting. And this time, it's not despair. It's patience. Shoots. Tiny, trembling, absurdly brave. You see the first one 2 days after planting, just a flick of green rising from the dark earth like a question mark. You drop to your knees, brushing aside damp soil, not daring to touch it. It stands barely an inch tall but proud, defiant, alive. You call your family to come see? Your children gasp like it's a miracle, and maybe it is. Your wife kneels beside you whispering, "It's early." But she doesn't sound worried. She sounds awed. This is what you've waited for, not warmth, not sun, not even food, just this proof that the world turns, that death is not permanent, that something always pushes upward. The village is buzzing now, not like summer, no. But there's rhythm. Someone's fixing a wheel. Someone else is leading goats down the path to the lower pasture. The forge sings again. You hear hammer on metal, steady as a heartbeat. You pass the chapel and notice fresh rushes laid along the threshold green ones. Father Aldrich always replaces them when he feels the season has truly changed. You pause at the door and inhale. Not incense grass. That green, peppery scent of new things. Later, a neighbor offers you onion bulbs, 3 of them. Found these under a tarp that didn't freeze through, he says. You trade a leather strap and a spool of rough thread. It's more than fair. Trade has returned. Abundance, though modest, begins to whisper again. Historians note that most medieval peasants lived closer to famine than we'd like to imagine, but they also built rituals around renewal maypoles. Dances, songs, little feasts, even when there wasn't much to feast with. Not to celebrate excess, but to honor survival. That night, someone lights a bonfire near the edge of the woods. It's not a holiday, not yet. But people gather anyway. The children run in circles, laughing until they collapse in the mud. Someone brings a flute. Someone else a drum made from stretched hide and a bucket. You bring nothing but yourself, and that's enough. The fire crackles. Sparks leap upward like prayers that don't need words. You stare at them a long time. Gerwin tells a story about a man who married a tree spirit and built her a house underground. She only came up in spring, he says, and only to plant onions. You laugh not because it's funny, but because you needed something absurd. Your daughter falls asleep in your lap. Her hair smells of wood smoke and bread. You carry her home as the fire dies. Your wife waits with a warm cloth and a bowl of broth. Thin again, but laced with sorrel and thyme. Green flavors, bright ones. Before bed, you check the chute again. Still standing, still foolishly alive. One fringe belief holds that if you whisper your hopes to a seedling, it will remember them. So you do. You lean down in the quiet night and murmur, "Grow." The light lasts longer now. At first you thought it was your imagination, just a trick of the eyes after too many gray months. But no, it's real. The sun doesn't vanish in the late afternoon like a thief. It lingers, warmer, curious, strolling slowly toward the horizon instead of bolting behind it. You notice it most in the work. There's time to finish a task now, to tie off a bundle of twigs, to walk back from the field without stumbling in dark. Time even to pause. The fields are changing. Every day another flicker of green. A fuzz of growth where last week there was only mud. The lentils sure. But also weeds. The unwanted are always fastest. You don't mind. Even the weeds mean the soil is breathing again. Your children chase beetles through the garden. They shriek when they find a worm, equal parts delight and terror. You show them how to scoop it up gently and return it to the soil. That's the real farmer, you say. Without worms, we're sunk. They look at you like you've crowned a king. Gerwin builds a scarecrow from a broken chair and a straw hat. It slumps like it's already tired, but it watches the field with stitched-on eyes. He's named Joffrey Gerwin announces. He'll scare the crows by sheer lack of charisma. You both laugh harder than the joke deserves. That's how you know it's a good one. Historians debate how widespread scarecrow use was in medieval villages. Some regions had elaborate traditions dressing them like local outcasts or saints. Others preferred noise clappers, bells, even old shoes tied to sticks. The point wasn't the method, it was the hope that something might protect the crops. Protection feels more possible now. You spot a hedgehog for the first time this year, plodding along near the fence, nose twitching, fur damp. You don't disturb it, you just watch. It disappears beneath a bush like a spell cast backward. At home, your wife is dyeing cloth with elderberry. The smell is sharp, almost sour, but the color... oh, the color. A deep bruised violet. She hangs the strips near the fire. They ripple when the breeze passes through like streamers for a festival no one has yet announced. You sip broth this time with bits of wild parsley and 3 whole beans from the last handful. Your daughter proclaims it the best soup in history. You believe her. That evening the chapel bells ring again. This time not for mourning but for marriage. 2 young villagers barely old enough to hold a hoe without tripping stand beneath the elm and exchange vows. It's simple, a blessing, a circle of hands, a promise made under an open sky. You watch with a strange ache in your chest. Joy and fear twined tight. Because what is love in spring if not the most courageous gamble? That night you walk outside one last time. The stars are visible now, sharp, bright, arrogant. The moon rests low over the hills like a silver coin dropped in the dirt. You stare upward and whisper, "Thank you." To what does it matter? You wake before the rooster, not because of cold, but because of light. A soft blue glow filters in through the cracks in the shutters. Not firelight, not moonlight. Morning, real morning? You rise quietly, careful not to wake the others. Your feet find the ground easily, no longer hunting for warm patches or avoiding frostbitten stones. You dress without haste. The layers are lighter now. Just wool, not fur. No need for the heavy cloak. You step outside into the quiet hush of dawn. The air smells like wet bark and smoke and grass. Grass, damp and sleepy and still half hiding but definitely there. You smile just a little. The frost is gone from the fence post. The thatch no longer drips. The well's rope is dry. These are the things you notice first. You walk toward the edge of the village where the path slopes gently toward the forest. There in the lowlands, the wild garlic spreads like a green tide. You kneel and gather some, careful not to pull up the bulbs. Your fingers are cold, but they move easily. No stiffness, no ache. That alone feels like a miracle. Historians still argue whether peasants had leisure. Some claim every moment was spent in labor. Others insist on pauses, festival stories, slow mornings like this one. You suspect both are right. It's not about time, but attention. When the world is less cruel, you notice it more. That noticing is rest. On your way back, you pass the old shrine carved into the tree. Someone, maybe the weaver's daughter, has left a bundle of violets at the base. The petals tremble in the wind, but they don't fall. You stop. Not to pray exactly, just to witness. At home, the hearth is already glowing. Your wife has started the fire. The children are still asleep, tangled together like puppies beneath the quilt. You sit beside them for a moment, watching their slow breathing. You brush a bit of soot from your son's cheek. You make a breakfast of garlic and oat mash. The scent wakes everyone before you call them. It isn't feast food, but it's warm, savory, bright. They eat with their hands and scrape the bowl clean. Gerwin stops by after breakfast holding a tiny wicker basket. Inside are 4 eggs, laid just this morning, he says with pride. The hens are back at it. You trade him half a pouch of dried apples. He nods in satisfaction, then adds, one of them's blue-shelled. Don't ask why. You don't. You just grin. That day you repair the door latch. Restring the bow. Count your remaining seeds and chalk the dates on the post near the hearth. Not for memory, for planning. For possibility. A fringe belief holds that spring shouldn't be declared by calendar, but by taste. First green, first egg, first mouthful of anything that hasn't been dried or salted. You take that seriously now. So when you boil the blue egg for supper, you do so gently. Reverently. It's small, it's ordinary, it's everything. You let your daughter crack it. She laughs when it steams in her hands. You remember that sound for the rest of your life. Your back is sore again, but it's the good kind of sore. Today was for digging. The fields are soft now, sun-warmed and cooperative. You sink your spade deep into the dark earth over and over until your arms hum with exhaustion. Each row tilled is a quiet declaration we're still here. You and Gerwin work side by side wordless for long stretches. There's something almost holy about it. The rhythm of digging, turning, raking, dirt under your nails on your boots and the creases of your palms. He mutters something about needing rain soon. You nod, but not yet. Let the roots grip first. Your children carry buckets of compost like little beasts of burden. They slosh and complain, but do the job anyway. One trips and dumps a full load on their foot. You all laugh, even the kid. It's better than crying. After midday, you rest under the elm. You share a crust of bread and a piece of cheese with Gerwin. The cheese is starting to mold. You cut around the green. It tastes sharper than you remember. You both chew in silence, watching crows argue over a worm. Historians still argue whether peasants found joy in this labor. Some claim they toiled under tyranny, no time, no freedom, no room for levity. Others argue for moments like this shade shared food, sore muscles, and a job nearly done. You live in the middle of that debate. The joy doesn't cancel the hardship, but it matters just as much. That afternoon, someone plays a fiddle. A real one. Not just singing or humming, but music with strings. You follow the sound to the green where 2 lads are clapping along. A small dance forms, rough, clumsy, but heartfelt. One old woman gets up and spins until she falls over laughing. You don't dance, but you sit and you smile. The kind of smile that uses your whole face. You walk home with a new ache in your legs and dirt in your cuffs. Your wife has washed the linens and hung them in the sun. They snap in the breeze like flags of surrender. The stew tonight has turnip greens. Not from your plot, they're still too small, but foraged from the wild edges of the woods. Bitter but fresh. You stir in a sliver of fat. It's thin, but it coats the tongue like hope. You tell stories by the fire. Not the scary kind, not the winter kind, but the nonsense kind. The talking goose, the boy who married a mushroom. The lady who turned into a windmill. The children scream with laughter at the windmill one. One fringe tale says laughter in spring ensures a healthy harvest. It doesn't matter if it's true. You tell 3 more jokes just in case. Later, you check your rows again by moonlight. You can barely see the green tips poking through, but you know where they are. You whisper to them anyway, and you say again, grow. But this time you add, we're ready, because now you are. The world has color again. It arrives gradually, like someone turning up the saturation on a faded painting. First, the green, bright, unruly pushing up through every crack and crevice. Then the yellows scattered across meadows like crumbs for giants. Then the blues and purples, violets, hyacinths, and the tiny ones no one bothers to name. You walk through it all with your hands outstretched, fingers brushing leaves and petals and bark. The wind is no longer something you brace against. It dances, it plays. The village reflects it too. Clothes hang brighter on the lines. The chapel door is flung wide most days. You hear laughter behind shutters, hear whistling from the well. Even the animals seem louder hens, clucking like gossiping old ladies, goats bleating with enthusiasm, the single cow groaning with maternal complaint. Yes, maternal. This morning she gave birth. Your children found the calf lying awkwardly in the straw, still slick wobbling on stick-thin legs. They screamed for you like the sky was falling. You ran panicked, breathless, only to find her already standing. Tiny. Alive? Perfect. You named her Prim. Gerwin wept. You pretend not to notice. Historians debate how much emotion peasants showed around animals. Some say they were purely functional tools for labor food wool. Others insist affection ran deep, just expressed differently. You know the truth, you name what you fear to lose. And you just named a calf. Your wife stitches a pouch for storing wild herbs. She hums while she works. Not a hymn. Not a lullaby. Just a tune with no words, but plenty of meaning. It floats through the house like sunlight. You pull your first spring onion from the edge of the field. It's crooked, dirty, and smells incredible. You chew the stalk raw, sharp, spicy, alive. It makes your eyes water, you grin through it. The children beg to sleep outside tonight. You say no, but they doze beside the door anyway, curled up like cats beneath the stars. You carry them in one by one, their arms around your neck. Warm breath against your collarbone. They're getting heavier. That comforts you. A fringe belief from a Breton text claims spring dreams can foretell the year's outcome. That night you dream of rain soft and long and of bread with thick crusts and sweet crumb. You dream of your father younger than you remember planting turnips while reciting a riddle. You don't remember the riddle when you wake, but you remember his hands. Calloused, patient, like yours. The first market day arrives with more rust than gold, but no one complains. The sky is patchy blue, streaked with the kind of cloud that threatens nothing but shade. You dress early, tugging on your second-best tunic and brushing straw from your boots. Your wife wears a kerchief with tiny red stitches. The children fight over who gets to carry the woven basket. The path to the green is alive. Neighbors emerge in twos and threes like roots seeking sunlight. There's chatter again. Laughter. Bartering before the booths are even set up. You lay out your offerings, a bundle of wild garlic, 3 boiled eggs, 2 small dyed cloths your wife prepared. It isn't much, but it gleams in the morning light. The old brewer has a barrel of weak ale, watery but drinkable. You trade for a wooden cup and sip. It tastes like possibility. Historians often debate how important markets were to medieval peasants, whether they were rare treats or central rituals. Some think them strictly transactional. Others see them as events of joy and gossip, tension, and ceremony. You feel the truth today. The market is the village unfolding itself in sunlight. You buy beeswax, a precious ounce. You trade for salt. A spoonful of dried elderberries costs you a promise to mend a neighbor's gate. Done. The children vanish into the crowd and return sticky with honey and full of stories. There was a juggler. There was a goat with 1 horn. He said it could count. You nod solemnly. And could it know? But it tried. You sit on a stump and watch the world swirl. Someone plays a pipe. Someone else dances in bare feet. You see Father Aldrich smiling and clutching a small cloth pouch. Someone whispers it's a charm against bad weather. You don't ask. Gerwin waves you over and gifts you a scrap of leather dyed green. To make a pouch, he says, or to remember this day. You tuck it into your tunic without a word. A fringe tale says that if you trade something you made yourself on the first spring market, your hands will stay strong all year. You didn't know that one before, but you believe it now. The sun stays out longer than you expected. Long enough that the children nap under a cart belly's full fingers, sticky dreams unbothered. On the way home, the air smells like pollen and hoof prints and something vaguely sweet you can't name. You walk slowly. The basket is lighter now, but your heart feels heavier in a good way. You cross the field and see your sprout standing straighter. You hum a little tune. Not for them. For you. Because today was not about survival. It was about living. And you did. The rain comes finally, not the sneaky drizzle of early thaw, but a proper spring rain. You wake to it drumming steadily on the roof, a rhythm both urgent and soothing. The kind that softens every edge and makes the whole world smell like turned earth and moss. You pull the blanket tighter and listen half dreaming as the drops form tiny rivers outside your window. No one hurries today. The village moves slower when it rains like this. The blacksmith doesn't light the forge. The herds are kept close. Children stay inside except for yours who beg until you let them stomp barefoot in puddles, laughing and slipping and tracking joy across the floorboards. Your wife brews tea from dried herbs. It smells like chamomile wood smoke and comfort. She hums as she stirs, and you sit beside her in silence content, just to watch the steam curl. You take out your tools and sharpen them one by one. The sickle, the spade, the shears. You do it slowly with care, letting your thoughts drift. This is a kind of prayer too quiet, repetitive, patient. Historians sometimes overlook these rainy days. They focus on festivals, famines, plagues, politics. But these moments, the sharpening of a blade beside a window streaked with rain, these are what life was built from. Not grand events, but rhythm. Outside the rivulets carve trails through the fields. You step out and check the rows. The sprouts look wild delighted. Their leaves glisten, their stems sway like dancers with muddy feet. You kneel in the rain and smile. A fringe belief from the eastern fens held that rain on a sowing day meant the dead were blessing the crop. You glance at the sky and whisper, "Thanks, Berthild. Just in case." Gershwin trudges by soaked to the bone, leading a stubborn donkey wrapped in a patchwork tarp. He grins. "Best growing weather there is," he shouts over the rain. You raise your cup to him and salute. Later the wind picks up. Not a storm, just a lively gust. It rattles the shutters and sends your drying herbs into a tizzy. You secure them, then help your daughter build a tiny boat from a scrap of bark. She names it Windfellow and launches it into the stream beside the path. It sails for 3 feet before capsizing gloriously. You cheer like it crossed an ocean. At dinner, you eat porridge with sweetened milk, thinned with water but warm and thickened with the last bit of crushed grain. It clings to your ribs in the best way. You read the children a story by firelight. Not from a book you don't have any, but from memory. It's about a fox who outsmarts the wind. Half your details are wrong. You make up the ending. They love it anyway. As night falls, the rain softens again. Not gone, just gentler. You fall asleep to its song on the roof, steady, sure, unbothered. and you dream of roots reaching deeper into softened earth, of sprouts unfurling like tiny flags, of you in the middle of it all, not surviving but growing. The sun returns in full glory and with it heat. Not oppressive, not yet, but real. The kind that makes you squint when you step outside. That dries the last puddles, coaxes worms to the surface, and turns damp paths into dust. Your sleeves are rolled today. You no longer brace against the cold when the wind blows. Instead, you lean into it. Your skin drinks in the warmth, like a remedy long denied. You spend the morning tending your sprouts. They're not just green anymore, they're leafed. Little unfurled flags of promise trembling on slender stems. You thin the rows, clearing space between them, even if it means pulling some you wish could stay. Growth means making room, and not everything gets to bloom. Your children help sorting good shoots from the weak ones. Your youngest names each before letting it go. Goodbye, Captain Leaf. Goodbye, Wiggle. You whisper thanks too. You find yourself whistling while you work. Later you help Gerwin with the irrigation ditch. It's just a narrow trench lined with stones winding toward the slope of the field. You drag heavy buckets, pack mud reposition logs. By noon your back aches and your boots squelch. But the water moves. It glides cool and gleaming, curling around roots like a caress. Historians note how rare controlled irrigation was in medieval Europe. Most villages relied on rain hope and whatever slope nature gave them. But ingenuity was everywhere. Even in small channels, even in hands like yours. At midday you break for bread and a little goat cheese. A honeycomb shard is passed around. Your wife licks the wax from her fingers. The children's faces are sticky and ecstatic. A fringe tradition in your region holds that the first honey of spring should be shared, not stored. So you do. After the meal, you nap in the shade of the elm. Not deep sleep, just a drifting float. You hear bees, distant bells, the soft scuff of feet on stone. You dream of roots that laugh, of vegetables that sing, of a world where every seed tells a joke before growing. You wake smiling. In the evening, you patch the roof with fresh thatch. The sun burns the back of your neck. Your hands itch from the straw. Still you finish. You're getting faster. Better. This too is growth. Your daughter tugs your sleeve to show you her flower, one she found near the river. It's yellow and brilliant and completely wild. I'm keeping it alive, she announces. You nod solemn. It's lucky to have you. Dinner is boiled peas and greens, mostly wild-picked. Still no meat, but you don't miss it. You eat slowly, grateful for texture, for brightness, for variety. You light a candle just because you can. Not for light, but for celebration. Spring is no longer a visitor. It lives here now. So do you. Birdsong wakes you. Not a rooster. Not a clatter. Not even your own thoughts. But birds. At first just one, a bright trill from the alder near the well. Then two. Then five. A full orchestra tuning up in the canopy above your cottage, each voice testing the air like a child dipping toes into warm bathwater. You rise slowly without the pull of dread. No frozen breath, no creaking joints. You roll your shoulders, stretch your arms overhead, and step outside barefoot. The ground is cool, damp from dew, and soft enough to welcome your weight. The field is alive. The lentils have doubled in size. The onions are pushing stronger. Even the rogue weeds look less like enemies and more like overzealous party guests. You kneel to inspect a particularly proud shoot and find a ladybug perched on the tip. You don't disturb her. She belongs here too. Your wife emerges brushing hair from her eyes. She yawns. It's warm, she says, surprised. You just nod. Warmth no longer comes as a threat, it arrives like a gift. Historians refer to this part of the year as the lean bloom. The hunger isn't over, but the evidence of plenty surrounds you. A strange paradox being surrounded by food you can't eat yet. But the body knows what's coming. And so it waits trusting. Gerwin brings news someone's goat gave birth. Twins. One's got a spot shaped like a boot. He grins. Other one tried to eat my cloak. You celebrate with ale that tastes like last autumn. The cask was hidden in the ground for months. Slightly sour but good. You drink from clay cups and pass it around like treasure. A fringe tale says that anything fermented underground will taste wiser. You're not sure about that, but this brew seems to know your secrets. You help your wife plant beans in the smaller patch beside the house. She presses each seed down with her thumb, murmuring under her breath. Not prayers, not exactly, just promises. You do the same. Grow, you whisper again. I'm ready now. The children collect feathers blown from trees and tuck them into their tunics like armor. Your son wears one behind his ear. Now I'm fast, he declares. You don't argue. The stew tonight has actual flavor. A few dried mushrooms, a pinch of saltwort. You close your eyes with the first spoonful, let it sit on your tongue. Your daughter sings while she chews off key and joyful. You take the long way to fetch water just to walk beneath the trees. The blossoms aren't here yet, but the buds are swelling. Tight fists waiting to unfurl. A hawk wheels above you, shadow. Racing across the grass, you follow it with your gaze hand raised to block the sun. This is not the end of hardship, you know that. The rains may flood, the harvest might fail. Illness always lurks in warm corners. But today, you're not afraid. You're awake. And so is the world. The blossoms arrive like a sigh. You wake one morning to find the orchard swaddled in white and pink. Not snow, not frost, but flowers so many they blur the edges of the branches like the trees themselves are glowing. You step closer and watch petals fall with every breeze soft as ash, weightless as breath. Your wife gasps when she sees them. It's early, she whispers, though you both know it's time. The apple trees have always bloomed on their own schedule, answering to nothing but their roots and the moon. You run your hands over the bark. The texture is rougher than you remember, but the scent, oh, the scent, it's honey and spring and something ancient. The bees arrive next. You see them swarming lazily, looping through the air with aimless confidence. One settles near your cuff, then lifts off, too busy for fear you envy it. Your wife sets a shallow dish of water on the windowsill for them. They need it too, she says. We all do. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers saw bees as livestock omens or neighbors. Maybe they were all three. Some kept hives in clay pots or wicker skeps. Others whispered secrets to them, warned them of deaths, thanked them for sweetness. You simply watch and listen. The garden is no longer potential, it's alive. Rows of shoots, dots of leaf herbs clawing joyfully at the sky. Your daughter counts them like soldiers. 3 parsley, 5 lentils, 2 onions, 1 mystery. You nod solemnly. The mystery's probably a poet. You laugh together until your bellies hurt. Gerwin gifts you a tin whistle carved from elderwood. To wake the sprouts, he says with a grin. You try to play. It squeaks like a goose with a grudge. Your son claps anyway. That night, your wife weaves a crown of blossoms and places it on your head. For planting so well, she says, smirking. You bow deeply, pretending you're a prince of vegetables. Later, you sit outside and watch the last light stretch over the fields. A warm gold settles over everything stones soil your skin. You sip water from a clay cup and taste nothing but spring. A fringe legend says if you sleep with a blossom under your pillow, you'll dream of your future. So you try it. That night you dream of bread with butter, of rain that falls only when asked, of your children dancing under trees older than memory. You dream of summer not as something far off, but something already walking towards you. And in that dream you are not cold, you are not hungry, you are simply there. The warmth clings now. No longer a fleeting visitor, no longer cautious, it settles into the bones of the village like a long-awaited friend finally sitting down to stay. The days stretch wider, fuller. You wake with the sun and rest when it lets you, and for once both feel generous. The field hums. You swear you can hear it, roots stretching leaves, flexing the soft buzz of life at work beneath the soil. The lentils are climbing now, threading through sticks you've planted as guides. The onions bulge beneath the dirt like secrets nearly confessed. You check them each morning like they're children. The village, too, has changed. A coat of energy covers everything. Roofs are being rethatched, fences mended, paint applied where it's never been needed before. People hum while they carry water. Even Gerwin walks straighter. He still complains he's Gerwin, but there's a lilt in it now, a theatrical moan, more than a real one. Your wife's hands are stained green from herbs. She dries them in tight bunches near the hearth, labeling each with wax chalk. The house smells like thyme, like lavender, like something clean and alive. She started writing blessings on the beams above your bed. You pretend not to notice, but you sleep easier now. Historians sometimes argue that medieval peasants lacked culture. No books, no paintings, no theaters, but they didn't need them. Their culture was living, found in rhythms and seasons and gestures passed down like songs hummed under breath. In flourished tool handles, in recipe tweaks, in planting times remembered by moon and ache. Tonight the chapel holds a vigil, not for grief, but for thanks. No special feast, just candles, voices, silence. You sit on the back bench listening as someone sings a song older than language. It moves through the space like smoke curling in rafters, settling in hearts. Afterward, you walk home by starlight. No torch, no rush. Just the cool hush of grass beneath your feet and the low chirr of insects finding their voice again. A fringe belief from a valley far south says the stars bless those who walk without fear in spring. You've feared so much this year, but tonight your heart is quiet. At home, your daughter has drawn pictures on the wall in charcoal sprouts, goat's birds with too many legs. You crouch beside them, add a crooked sun, and scrawl your name. She gasps when she sees it. You signed my art. You whisper, I'm your biggest fan. She throws her arms around you like she's never letting go. And for a moment, just one, you let yourself believe the worst is behind you. That the harvest will be good. That no frost will return uninvited. That all things, if planted with care, will grow. The harvest isn't here yet, but its breath is on the wind. You can feel it in the thickness of the leaves and the way the earth gives slightly under your heel like a pillow fattened by promise. You walk the edge of the field with your hands in your pockets, your steps slow, almost reverent. Everything is taller now. The lentils coil greedily up their stakes. The onions wear green hats that sway in the breeze. Even the weeds seem smug. You pluck a few just to keep them humble. Your wife has started saving scraps in a pouch marked winter. Not out of fear, out of wisdom. The cold will come again, it always does. But next time you'll be ready. You teach your son how to sharpen the sickle. Your daughter practices walking the rows without stepping on anything. Like a cat, you say. A gentle one. She meows and nearly steps on a beat. You both laugh. Historians often try to measure success in grain counts, tax records, census scrolls. But you measure it here in the hands of a child learning not to crush what feeds her. In a wife who smiles without pretending. In a roof that no longer leaks. Gerwin stops by with a folded scrap of wool. For winter, he says. I figured, well, you'll need mittens. You don't argue. You just tuck it away. You'll stitch them yourself, maybe with your daughter. She's already asking for pink thread. A fringe belief says if you store kindness with your grain, neither will spoil. You hope it's true. You've got just enough of both to risk believing. That evening the sky glows orange, a soft, endless fire melting behind the hills. You sit beside your wife, her head on your shoulder, the children asleep in a tangle of limbs and dreams. No one says a word. You hear the wind ruffle the fields, a low, lazy whisper. The earth is still working, still busy, but for the first time in months, you are not, and that is enough. You glance up at the stars and remember when they seemed distant, indifferent. Now they feel like old friends watching over the last few minutes of day. The scent of chamomile drifts from the hearth. Your eyes begin to close. You don't fight it. The world doesn't need you alert anymore. Just present. Just grateful. Just still. And now, as the fire sinks low and the fields beyond your window fade into blue shadow, you sit with your hands open on your lap, quiet, steady, full. The wind outside is slow and warm, rustling through the fresh leaves like fingers across silk. It carries no urgency now, just a lullaby for the roots and the bones and the birds tucked beneath the eaves. You've lived through the ice, through the hunger, through the long silence of winter. You've watched life return not all at once, but in cautious whispers. Shoots, eggs, laughter, a tune played badly on a wooden whistle. And somehow through it all you stayed. Not perfectly, not always joyfully, but completely. You've walked the hard months, and now here at the edge of sleep, you carry the proof in your breath, your body, your slow, calm pulse. The worst has passed. The earth remembers you. The seeds have heard you. And tomorrow, quietly, patiently will arrive. So rest now. Let your shoulders fall. Let your thoughts drift like petals on a pond. There is nothing more to do tonight. No tool to lift, no cold to brace against, no hunger prowling at the edge of dark. Just the hush of a safe home, a soft bed, a world exhaling, and you, exactly where you need to be. End of script. Sweet dreams,